or gofund.me/Ghost Machine. Our independent sponsor is Food for Liberty. I have teamed up with them to offer you a high-quality, GMO-free, non-MSG, storable food with a 25-year shelf life. You may say your order's on the way, and all reports are this food is delicious. It's all true. So, get some high-quality, storable food. /Ghost. Okay, here we are. Mr. Stone, are you with us?
I hope so.
You are here. Great.
We had a technical difficulty here.
Thank you so much for coming on the air, doing this. It's an honor to have you. Roger Stone, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do, and of course your relationship to what is going on with this election, because you've done your homework and you've got a professional relationship with the Trump campaign, and all these things are very big and important reasons why I've asked for your interview today.
Well, I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I am a veteran of 9 Republican presidential campaigns, starting with my mentor, Richard Nixon, 3 campaigns for Governor Ronald Reagan, 1976, 1980, 1984. I am not a fan of the Bush crime family. I was a proud supporter and a former U.S. Senate aide to Senator Bob Dole, a great American patriot who is actively supporting the Trump-Pence ticket. I am a Goldwater Republican who's pretty disgusted with the Republican Party. You know, I have great sentimental attachment to the Republican Party. I'm a former young Republican national chairman from 1977 and 1979. But I remember the days when the Republican Party was the party of small government, low spending, low taxes, peace through strength. Today, we're the Wall Street, K Street, neocon party that goes looking for endless war, erosion of our civil liberties, massive debt and spending, bailouts for the big crooks on Wall Street, while average people can't find work because these globalist trade deals we made, both the Bushes and the Clintons, have shipped all of our jobs offshore. So I'm technically a member of the Libertarian Party, a lot of nuts in that party too, but it is at least closer to my political views. I like to call myself a conspiracy analyst. The people at Media Matters for America, the money laundering front for the Clintons, run by the criminal David Brock, call me a conspiracy theorist. By the way, Steve, that's not a compliment when they say that.
Yeah, when they say it, it is not, which is why you came up with conspiracy analyst, which is great. And then I was telling you a little bit off the break before we got started about the coined term that you may have my full permission to steal of conspiriologist.
That's what I am from this day forward. Now, I actually borrowed the term conspiracy analyst from Gore Vidal, a man who once said, "Never pass up the chance to have sex or be on television." So here we are on the latter, that is.
All right, I can only fulfill one of those for you, sir.
Thank God.
It's all good. Oh man, yes. So you're saying that I have better terminologies than Gore Vidal?
Well, I like conspiriologist, and I will start using it. The truth is, I'm sorry, I don't believe Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy and acted alone. I don't believe that Watergate was strictly about 7 men breaking into the Watergate. It's far more complex than that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that the Bushes are conservatives. They're crony capitalists who have lined their pockets handsomely while their policies have made the people in this country poorer.
Yeah.
They've crashed our economy and plunged us into foreign wars that were about their grudge matches with Saddam Hussein and their interest in the oil business. And of course, the Clintons are just stone cold criminals. These people would steal a hot stove. The Clinton Foundation is not a charity. It's a slush fund for grifters. It's a vehicle for the facilitation of multi-million-dollar bribes. This is the largest money laundering scheme in U.S. criminal history. Before it's all over, and when you take the international affiliates, this is a multi-billion-dollar fraud. Whether it is defrauding the people of Haiti, who they were supposed to rebuild after the earthquake, or whether it is selling rights to 70% of the uranium production in this United States to a Russian conglomerate close to Vladimir Putin, Putin's clique. The Clintons they're criminals, and it's a giant pay-for-play scheme.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's like it takes a very, very long time. Like, people are very easy because of, how George H.W. Bush's attitude was in '88. When people saw his real teeth, and then the incompetency of George W. Bush. Like, it's very easy for people to accept harsh criticism and conspiracies about the Bushes, but when you try to talk about the Clintons, it's taken forever to knock their golden idol down. And just like, because sometimes I'm sitting there just like, I guess I can start by mentioning Mina Air Base. Did you know about Mina Air Base and the CIA or whatever? And then sometimes I feel like that's all I got because their mind is so closed, and that's like the best document I have. And Donald Trump has destroyed the Clintons, and he hasn't even mentioned Mina Air Base. So that's fantastic.
Well,
Everybody should think.
He made short work of the heir apparent because, Steve, as you and I know, Jeb Bush was unstoppable. He was the front runner. It was his birthright. As his father told McKenna Bunkport, this is ours, son. It's your birthright. It's your destiny to take it back. Now, Jeb, who was a drug dealer in boarding school, a drug dealer in college, a drug dealer when he first got to Miami, made millions of dollars off of the governorship of Florida. He transferred the management of the state pension funds to Lehman Brothers, and then lo and behold, right after he leaves the governorship, he becomes a consultant to Lehman Brothers, where he gets a $5 million signing bonus. It wasn't a signing bonus. It was a payoff. So the Bushes are as corrupt as they come. Jeb, Marvin, all the brothers have been profiteering. George H.W. covered up the POWs we left in Vietnam when he was CIA director,
right?
Ran the drug trafficking operation through Arkansas with hefty payoffs to Bill Clinton, passed through his associate Dan Lassiter.
Right.
And as I have written in my book, Jeb and the Bush Crime Family, George W. knows far more about the assassination attempt than Ronald Reagan than we have been told.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, like, the evidence is there because was John Hinckley Jr. That's the right one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he was like friends with George H.W. Bush. They were like, they had like seen each other for like some social function, like the week prior to the shooting or something. And that was all public record, all the hush hush, right?
Yeah, the two families are so close that that Hinckley Jr. writes when he's asked, he writes to an interviewer that he shot at Reagan to make his uncle George Bush president. Now, there's a lot of problems with the Reagan assassination attempt. Bill O'Reilly's book, which is now out, is a total load of dung. It's completely wrong. Let me go through these quickly. You've seen the iconic picture of Reagan waving just before he's shot. The Secret Service manual requires the president, when he's out in public, be surrounded by the Secret Service in a diamond formation. Why is Reagan in the photo way out ahead of his detail? The car, the limousine, is supposed to be parked as close to the hotel door as possible, per the Secret Service manual. Why is Reagan walking down the block to get to his car? There are 5 bullets shot by Hinckley, who is in a crouching position. But the bullet that hits Reagan comes from an upward angle. Both ABC and NBC report, in this case, Leslie Stahl for CBS, CBS and NBC. Leslie Stahl for CBS and Judy Woodruff for NBC both report a man standing on a balcony above the hotel door holding a pistol. You won't find that in the archives, however, and when I interviewed both of them, neither one could quite recall that. Fortunately, it's on YouTube, it's indelible, and it happened. When you blow up the iconic photo of Reagan, which I had to get from the original photographer because the copy of the photo delivered by the government is carefully cropped, you actually see the man standing in the balcony in the door of his room holding what appears to me to be a gun. The 5 bullets shot by Hinckley are all accounted for. None of them hit Reagan. 3 of them are across the street. 1 of them hits a police officer. 1 of them hits Brady. There's an additional bullet. This is very much like the Kennedy assassination. So the government's cover story is one of Hinckley's bullets hit the car door and ricocheted and hit Reagan from an upward angle. Not even sure how that's possible if he's crouching, but no dent, no nick, no marks on the car door. So we haven't been told everything. Hinckley Sr. is a close friend of George Bush's, a major financier of his campaign for president in 1980. The Dallas Times-Herald says on page 1 he was a major supporter of Ronald Reagan. Actually never gave a dime to Ronald Reagan in his life, but he did finance George Bush's campaign for the Senate in 1964, the House in 1966, again in 1968, and his losing Senate race in 1970, as well as his presidential campaign, which collapsed in New Hampshire in 1980. I was on the Reagan staff. The Reagan and Bush people immediately start struggling for the nuclear football. That's because George Bush leaves. He's in Texas. He flies back to Washington expecting to be sworn in because he thinks Reagan's dead, and they've taken him to the hospital. I'm sure he's disappointed when he gets to Washington to find out that the plot failed and that Reagan, a great American, survived.
Indeed. Actually, a good question about that entire era that actually comes to mind, because when I was doing a little bit of my research, I was running around, I was asking people, it's just like, hey, listen, if you had a question for this man who's very important because he's got an ear with Donald Trump, who could be the most powerful man in the world in a few months, what would you do? And a couple of people had come to me because they wanted to know more about as a trust issue, what the story is and relationship to Donald Trump of a gentleman that I did a little bit of research of and had heard about before called Roy Cohn. And so Wikipedia, and I couldn't validate it, Wikipedia claims that you knew Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was associated with I believe Ronald Reagan to a certain extent, and also I think he represented Donald Trump in the 70s or something like that. What can you tell us about Roy Cohn?
Sure. Roy Cohn was the son of Judge Albert Cohn, who was a Tammany Hall Democrat judge and a major power broker in New York City politics. Roy became the counsel to Senator Joe McCarthy. His co-counsel was a young man named Robert Kennedy. They'd like us to forget that. And that was the first time Cohn and Kennedy would tangle. Cohn became notorious in the country. Many people thought he was the man behind McCarthy in his quest to banish communists from the government. The mainstream media would tell you the whole thing was a witch hunt. But if you read the book Blacklisted by History by the late, great M. Stanton Evans, essentially everything McCarthy said was true. The country was riddled with communist spies during the Roosevelt and Truman administrations. Cohn went on to practice law in New York City, was indicted twice by the Kennedy Justice Department and Attorney General Robert Kennedy. In both cases, he represented himself at trial, and he beat the government twice and was acquitted 2 times, which is extraordinary given the resources of our federal government. He was very well connected in anti-communist circles. He was a Democrat his entire life. He became friendly with Ronald and Nancy Reagan in the 50s when Reagan was fighting the communists as president of the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood. And when I was assigned to New York for Governor Ronald Reagan to organize his campaign there, Nancy Reagan gave me contact information for Roy Cohn. I went and made an appointment with Cohn, who was a very, very scary guy, a very tough guy. And he gave me a few minutes of his time, was kind of like, okay, kid, what do you want? I got 5 minutes. I explained to him what I was doing. And from that point on, he became enormous help to me, I think because of his close friendship with the Reagans. The first thing I told him was that I had to organize a finance committee. And he said, you need Donald Trump. Do you know Donald Trump? And I said, no, not really. I've read his name in the tabloids, but I don't really know him. And Roy said, you need Donald and Fred Trump. Fred was Donald's father, a very great man in his own right, made the family fortune building middle-class housing in Queens and the outer boroughs, was known for his integrity, was known for his honesty and his fairness. He actually helped people finance buying their first homes, which he charged a fair price for. He was a close friend of Barry Goldwater, an original financier of Goldwater's campaign, and an enthusiastic Reagan supporter, as it turned out. So Cohn introduced me to Trump. Trump heard my pitch. He signed on the Reagan Finance Committee, raised us a substantial amount of money, helped us find low-cost office space for our headquarters in Manhattan, which is almost unheard of, a building he did not own, by the way. He helped expedite the installation of our telephones. He actually lent us his plane to fly our filing petitions to get on the ballot to Albany, the state capital, which we made in the nick of time, an enormous number of signatures that are required under state law. So this is how I first became friends with Donald Trump in 1981. After Reagan was elected, I became a consultant to the Trump Organization, later a consultant to Trump hotels and casino resorts. And after spending a short amount of time with Donald Trump, I began to see that he had the size and the independence to be president. Of course, I don't mean physical size, I mean the stature.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, he's not a globalist. He's not a believer in regional government. He is a nationalist. He believes in American sovereignty and American power and American exceptionalism. And he's only running for president because he sees that the American dream is dying.
And that's always the argument that I put at people. It's just like, listen, it is important to argue about whether Donald Trump is telling the truth, but we also have to analyze precisely what he said, because all I hear from you is regurgitated mainstream media talking points. I had a couple of good friends I asked, and they asked me questions to ask you. And I said, like, well, think a little bit better about that, because those questions are actually being asked ad nauseum on the mainstream media. Ask a question you've never heard before, because this is all about, you ask new questions to get new answers, to get different results, because somebody who is going to stick by a story because it is the truth or they want you to believe it is not going to change the story, especially if you can't find any evidence to contradict it. And because it's been so long in such things, it is where the credibility becomes established. I actually, so yes, you've developed quite a relationship, and certainly he's got everything that it takes to be president. And of course, he just, there's a psychological game that he is playing with the public for our benefit and to the detriment of the mainstream media, as we believe, by being politically incorrect and all these things. It's like, at what point did you know that you could trust Donald Trump to do the right thing as president?
Well, I started urging him to run for president as early as 1988. I looked at George H.W. Bush, and I was not very impressed. After 4 years of Reagan, I knew that he would, in fact, despite his no new taxes pledge, he would raise taxes, the functional end of Reaganism, which of course he did. So I tried to get him to run in 1988. We actually made a trip to Portsmouth, New Hampshire to speak to the Chamber of Commerce, where the first known draft Trump for President committee was ever formed by a guy named Mike Dunbar, who was then a Portsmouth city councilman. but it was, I think, premature. In 2000, I was the chairman of his Presidential Exploratory Committee. Ross Perot and Jesse Ventura, who was then the governor of Minnesota, both urged Trump to seek the Reform Party nomination. You may recall the other two candidates were George W. Bush and Al Gore. In retrospect, I wish Trump had run. 4 years ago, I wanted him to take on the hapless country club dope, Mitt Romney, a guy who could never identify with average people. And I wish, again, that he had done so, because I think he would have beaten Obama then. But now the time was absolutely right, because in the 40 years that I have been running campaigns, in the 9 presidential campaigns I've been in, and scores of campaigns for governor and the U.S. Senate, I have never seen the voters in this kind of mood. I've never seen this kind of disenchantment and anger in both the Congress, political institutions, both major parties, and here's the key part, the mainstream media. See, they figured that they're all in it together. If it's on CNN, the odds are overwhelming that it's not true.
Faith in all establishment is dead. It's just like, it's no secret like I had been so disenfranchised myself that I put myself through hell experimenting with theories alternative in law, looking for common law, natural law, the sovereign citizen, quote unquote, movement. And so I tried a few things and it hurt. And the state of New Jersey just let me know how much it was going to hurt as I spent a little bit of time for driving without plates and insurance and all those things, because I just wanted to be like, when the Constitution was drafted, nobody said we got to put plates on the backs of all our horses. So why do I have to have a plate on the back of my car?
I'm sure the judge was very receptive to that argument.
Oh, I had given up by the time I reached the Jersey judge. I had gone through a million hearings through proper channels in Connecticut when I was in trouble and was trying to challenge the system. And it's a whole mess. And I'm not here to talk about that. But in a small sense, I am, because like you, I am very libertarian minded. I registered as a Republican in 2008 to vote for Ron Paul after he started getting exposure and I started understanding the ideas of ending the Federal Reserve and learning what libertarian values and philosophies were. And so I voted for Ron Paul in the primaries in 2008. I gave Barack Obama a chance and voted for him then. 2012 came around. I voted for Ron Paul again. And in the general election, I voted for Gary Johnson. And
exactly like me. I voted for Ron Paul. My last official act as a Republican, I voted for Ron Paul in the 2012 Republican primary. And then I voted for Gary Johnson and helped him get on the ballot in 48 states in the general election. Gary Johnson's a good man. Had Donald Trump not staged the hostile takeover of the Republican Party, I'd be for the Johnson-Weld ticket right now.
I have deep concerns about Johnson, though. He seems to be like some of his particular positions, and then Bill Weld Bill Weld has an association of the Council on Foreign Relations, whom I do not trust. He seems to be more into gun control than a libertarian ought to be. And I can't, and at the end of the day, it feels like the only reason I can vote for Gary Johnson is because he'd legalize weed. And I'm not going to sacrifice the country so I can smoke pot on a street corner.
Well, I must admit, I liked Gary's positions better 4 years ago, but maybe that's because I was advising him 4 years ago.
Oh, well.
And he has taken in this race some non-libertarian positions. Bill Weld is a good friend of mine. He has a first-class intellect.
Okay.
He was for the Patriot Act. I think he supported the war in Iraq. And as you point out, his position on guns has changed. He was good on guns when he was governor. Right. He was a very libertarian, conservative governor. Low taxes, low spending, cutting regulation, good on the Second Amendment. It is only later that we have some policy disagreements, but he's a very fine man. He's a very decent man. And let's face it, that ticket's not going to win. They should have been admitted in these debates. I am outraged that the Commission on Presidential Debates is not a commission, not appointed by the president, and not even about debate. It's about limiting debate. So the idea that a candidate needs 15% in 3 polls to get into the national debates says who? According to who? The Republican and Democrat national chairman? Because that's who set that rule. I mean, the criteria is simple. Are you on the ballot in enough states to get 270 electoral votes? Theoretically. Jill Stein will be on the ballot in 44 or 48 states. Gary Johnson will be on in 48 or 50 states. Let them in the debate. If I were Donald Trump and I told him this, he shouldn't debate at all if they're not included. By the way, if you do the math, net negative to Hillary if both of them were in the debates.
That is true. The polls show that that they only serve to hurt Hillary, because I think the early mainstream media strategy was to see if the libertarian ticket could pull from Donald Trump's supporters, but it didn't. It backfired and it pulled from Hillary's supporters.
What other reason would we have for the fact that Gary Johnson literally could not get on CNN 4 years ago? I don't think they interviewed him once, not once. This time he's been on multiple times. Why? Well, because Jeff Zucker at CNN thinks he's sucking votes from Donald Trump. That's why. And you're absolutely right. It isn't worked out that way. Yeah. Now, when you add Jill Stein together, net negative Hillary. That's why they should have let both of them in the debate, beyond the fact that they both have legitimate views that need to be heard. Neither one of these candidates is for the legalization of marijuana and the reform of our drug laws. Neither one of them is opposed to the Patriot Act. So I think we would be much richer as a country, and this debate would be much healthier if the 2 minor party candidates were on the ballot. You know, the measure of viability is ballot access. Getting on the ballot in 48 states is a backbreaking, expensive process that you cannot achieve without grassroots support. It's impossible without grassroots support in the 50 states. So I really think that Trump has missed the boat on this point. I would have demanded that they be in the debate, and I would have refused to debate without them. That would have made Trump look inclusive, and it would make Hillary look like what she is, a witch.
Right. I was having a funny thought. It's I don't have time to get into it. It's more of a cute story that's not important. But I'll have to tell you about something in my imagination I had. Right. But where was I? Oops, wrong spot. Our my special producer for today, Nighthawk. Everybody knows who runs the station. He has a question about what about Ross Perot?
Well, what about him? Ross Perot ran for president in 1992 because he hated George H.W. Bush. And the reason he hated him was Perot became convinced in the early 90s that we had left prisoners of war behind in Southeast Asia. And he took his concerns to the president, Ronald Reagan, and Reagan said, Ross, I want you to talk to Vice President Bush about this. I want him to handle it. Of course, Bush gave him happy talk, but did nothing. Perot then hired a number of soldiers of fortune and other intelligence experts of his own, including the legendary Bo James Gritz, or Greitz, I think you say his name. And they did go to Southeast Asia, but what they found was not POWs. What they found was the U.S. government in the body of the CIA trafficking in heroin. Perot rushed to Washington to see his fellow Texan and report this breathlessly to the vice president. And as his lawyer and his son told me, he was met with a grim smile. That's because George H.W. Bush was running the drug trafficking operation.
May I break in a minute, because Steve didn't quite, I don't think he understood my question. It was basically, the question that I had was, what I see is the Democratic Party seems to be throwing some money Fred Johnson's way in order to do exactly what the Clintons did before, I call it Ross Perotting, using somebody to pull votes from Trump and push it into Gary Johnson by funding his campaign through the media in order to pull votes out, just like they did with Ross Perot.
Well, that's exactly where I was headed. Consequently, Perot decides to run for president, and we now know from Bill Clinton's bodyguard, he spoke to Clinton by phone every single day of that campaign because they were in a pincer move to split the votes off of George H.W. Bush and elect Bill Clinton. Little did Ross Perot know that Clinton himself had been involved in the drug trafficking trade. I think he learned that only later. I don't see any great evidence of Republicans financing Johnson. In fact, I'm a little surprised they haven't raised more money than they have. But as Steve pointed out, polling shows that Johnson is pulling almost as many votes from Hillary as he is Trump. And when you add Jill Stein, it's net negative Hillary. That's why you need both of them in the debate if you're a Trump supporter.
But most of my friends are liberal from the area that I live in, what I thought was funny when people brought up Roy Cohn is that Roy Cohn lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. That's where I am.
Yes. Well, he had a country place in Greenwich.
Yeah.
Lived in a brownstone on the Upper East Side. Look, he is his name is reviled among liberals because in the 50s he was the counsel to Joe McCarthy, very close to the archdiocese and the personal attorney for the cardinal in New York, very close to Donald Trump, his personal attorney. I think kind of the guy who showed him how Manhattan worked. And he was a major power broker in the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. He helped make Ed Koch mayor of New York City, for example. But his name is despised. Now, earlier this week, Congressman Jerry Nadler, a machine Democrat from Manhattan, called on the FBI director to open an investigation into Roger Stone because I am, through an intermediary, in touch with Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, who does not work for the Russians. Let me say it again. Assange does not work for the Russians. For liberals who are a little slow, let me say it one more time. Assange does not work for the Russians. But Nadler launched this witch hunt, abusing his office, demanding that I be investigated because he says Assange is a Russian agent. He's not a Russian agent. So, Fat Jerry, say it outside Congress where you don't have your congressional immunity, and I'll sue your fat ass so fast your head will spin. This is abuse of power. This is a witch hunt. This is a waste of the taxpayers' money. You're a shill for crooked Hillary. If you want to investigate anybody, Jerry, start investigating the Clinton Foundation.
Well, I told some people when they were just like, oh, well, who's Roger Stone? Well, he's this, that, and the other thing. And obviously he means something because there's a bunch of people that have spoken his name in public hearings in Congress in anger. So obviously he's a threat to somebody. So I think I got to catch it.
It's fear. It's not anger. It's fear because they know I'm committed to the truth.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of Jerry Nadler. And the FBI is welcome to investigate my ties to Russia. I have none. Now, I do like a little stuffed cabbage now and then. But beyond that, I've never worked for the Russian government. I'm not paid by the Russian intelligence services. I have never done any business in Russia. I've never been to Russia. Mm-hmm. This is a canard. This is the new McCarthyism. Mm-hmm. Oh, Donald Trump is a traitor to his country. No, it's very simple. Trump wants peace. Hillary wants war. It is the Clinton-Obama policies that have brought us to the brink of war with the Russians. Trump favors a détente, some hard-headed negotiations with the Russians so that we could coexist and maybe work together to crush ISIS, which we now must do because Hillary did arm ISIS and George W. helped create the vacuum that formed ISIS. So Trump is essentially correct. This is the most irresponsible political charge that hacks and hangers-on like Nadler make.
Right now, it literally...
I can't wait to see Jerry in New York. I just can't wait.
It feels like the State Department is working, like, it almost feels like it's working aside from the Obama administration. There was just reported in the news today at random from the State Department with no word from the president about it that we stopped talking to Russia today. Like we just ended communications with these guys, which is another step in degrading our relationship.
Well, and as you know, they lost thousands of emails. They lost these emails. They only just popped up a week ago. So the FBI director gives Hillary a pass on her email and server crimes. The CIA director last week says on the basis of nothing whatsoever that he's concerned that the Russians are going to hack our election. The Russians, Mr. Director, you should be more concerned with Rahm Emanuel and the Chicago machine than you are the Russians.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, like the day that the bombing happened, that big day last week, that was the same day that there was a completely unauthorized airstrike, which I believe is a war crime, isn't it? Considering there was the ceasefire deal, and we broke that unprovoked. That's pretty much a war crime, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it is. Look, we read today that Hillary Clinton wanted to use a drone strike to kill Assange. Why? Because she knows that he has evidence of her crimes. That's why.
Oh yeah. I mean, and the reason why I was saying the State Department seems like it's completely gotten away from the government and the White House is because the same, like before, after the airstrike happens, Barack Obama's hanging out, getting his Black Award from the Congressional Black Caucus dinner, and I'm just like, World War III's about to start because John Kerry made a bad move, and you're sitting here preserving your political legacy on a racial level? What is wrong with you, man? We're gonna die, and you're trying to look good on your last year.
Well, look, I think that the rotted, fetid globalist two-party duopoly that have run this country in the ground, they're prepared to do anything to steal this election. If it's war with Russia that they need at the end, we'll have a war with Russia. That's how high the stakes are.
Unfortunately,
Bill and Hillary and their nasty, greedy, foul-mouthed, abusive little daughter, Hillary, who's 30 years old and a co-conspirator in their money laundering crimes at the Clinton Foundation, know that if Donald Trump becomes president, they're headed to prison for the rest of their lives. And they know that Julian Assange has the evidence that will convict them. That's who will connect the dots. That's why they'll steal this election if they have to, through voter fraud and through rigging of the machines. When I wrote an extensive piece for The Hill, the Capitol Hill newspaper, talking about how the election can be rigged and stolen, Media Matters for America, the illegal money laundering operation run by the criminal David Brock, put pressure on The Hill to censor me. Now, I've already been banned at CNN because I won't stop talking about the fact that Bill Clinton is a sexual predator who has raped or assaulted at least 13 women. I think the number's 27, actually. And that Hillary Clinton has been an accessory after the fact in every one of these crimes. First of all, she knows about the rapes in real time, and she's the one who hires the nasty lawyers and the heavy-handed private detectives to threaten his victims. She's complicit. She's an accessory. This isn't about affairs, Michael Smerconish at CNN, or Megan Twohey at the New York Times. It has nothing to do with affairs. It has nothing to do with consensual sex. It's not about adultery or marital infidelity or girlfriends or mistresses. It's about violence against women. It's about sexual assault.
Oh, yeah.
Rape. And when you say that on CNN, you get banned.
Oh,
you
yeah.
say it on MSNBC, which nobody's watching anyway, and you get banned. This is why Alex Jones and I have been promoting the iconic Clinton rape T-shirt.
Yeah.
Anybody who can get on national TV wearing this shirt will get a monetary reward from Infowars.com.
What is it? You got to yell, Bill Clinton is a rapist or something like that?
Well, if you yell Bill Clinton's a rapist and it's audible, you'll get $5,000.
All right.
If you just show the T-shirt, you get $1,000. And because the mainstream media has to be crashed. Now, let me stress, we're not urging you to break into the studio and break the law. We're not urging you to crash the set. But often the TV cameras are outside, as they were Saturday morning, and a young patriot stormed the barricade, stood up on a barricade so he could be seen, flashing his T-shirt. and yelled, "Bill Clinton is a rapist." He said it 3 times. That's $5,000 for the First Amendment.
All right, there you go. Hey, listen, I got another very important question. I want to lead this question first because it's from a family that means a whole lot to me. I was going through a dark night of the soul, and I told them you gotta ask a question. I want them to know, and this is from and I told them I was gonna say their name on the air. I said, like, I want to make sure that Trump campaign and especially Chris Christie know that you guys exist because you are beautiful human beings. Because in many respects, they saved my life when I was making horrible judgment calls, and was able to help me keep being on the air at the same time. And that's the Cohn family from New Jersey. They are like my second family. They're my brothers, my sisters, their children. I'm like an uncle. I feel in a respect. I love them to death. And their question for you is Hillary Clinton related to the coup in Turkey? And can Trump lead us there?
I believe that she is deeply involved in the coup in Turkey. My good friend, Dr. Jerome Corsi, has written and talked about this and is more authoritative on the issue than I am. I was not at all surprised to see the testimony in federal court that Governor Chris Christie knew all about the bridge closing at the George Washington Bridge, and he in fact approved it and laughed about it. I told Donald Trump this over a year ago. I think it is a strong reason why Chris Christie is not on the ticket. And I'm still perplexed when I read stories that the Trump campaign is thinking of having him involved in the debate preparation. He has lied repeatedly, at least publicly. We don't know what he said in his FBI interview. I suspect he may have told them the truth because he's a smart guy and a good lawyer, and he knows that lying to the FBI in a criminal investigation is a felony. But he is up to his hips in the George Washington Bridge closing. The notion that he knew nothing is BS. He's a control freak, and he knew everything. That a federal judge has ordered that the list of co-conspirators and the list of public officials who knew in advance of the closing and did nothing to stop it will not be made public shows you how corrupt our federal judiciary is. The people had a right to know, and I think a need to know, but some hack judge ruled otherwise. Outrageous, in my opinion.
My theory is, as I look at them, I see like almost a power trio of Trump, Christie, and Giuliani, because it's that Metro New York City relationship there. And I look at it, and I look at what their roles were at that time, and how they've stood behind Donald Trump and everything that he's said. And I have this theory that they are in their own little tight-knit conspiracy because they are sick of the lies about 9/11. So what do you think Donald Trump believes about 9/11, the 9/11 Commission report, the whole 9 yards? Because that is always, for conspirologists, conspiracy analysts, that's always the litmus test of trust. Do you question 9/11? Or do you not? I think we all know that Donald Trump has questions about 9/11, but is he going to be an attack dog for correcting the record? Because those three guys, they know a lot about the year 2001.
Well, I would hope that he would appoint a new commission that is truly independent, put people like Ron Paul on it so we can find out what really happened. Because I have my own questions. They're not assertions, they're questions. Why would we redact the 28 pages of the congressional inquiry, which clearly show that the Saudi royal family and their retainers financed the attack on the United States on 9/11? The CIA director says that's not what it says, but Mr. Director, we can read. That's precisely what it says. There's additional evidence that the government had that Gerald Posner, of all people, has written 2 excellent books exposing the Saudis' role in 9/11. Now, Posner's wrong about the Kennedy assassination, which was 55 years ago, but he's right about the Saudis' role in 9/11. And Congressman Peter King, who I introduced and interviewed on my radio show, The Stone Cold Truth, on the Genesis Communications Network this past Saturday, said that he believed that the information in the congressional report was correct and that further investigation was necessary. So I'd like to know about the Saudis' role. Now, you'll remember in the debates when Trump confronted Jeb on what he knew, because here's where Trump was going. 4 of the hijackers trained in Florida under Jeb's nose. There were 22 separate complaints to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, that's essentially the state police, about these strange men training at a local training flight school who seemed to be very interested in how to take off, but weren't too interested in learning how to land.
Right.
And Jeb did nothing. Nothing. That's why he folded, because that's where Trump was going.
Have you ever?
That's no good answer.
Have you ever had a conversation that you can discuss publicly with Donald Trump about 9/11?
It has always been my policy to leave my private conversations with Donald privileged.
Yes, of course.
I will not betray personal conversations because it would destroy our relationship and the fact that we can speak confidentially. But I do think that he would like to get to the bottom of what happened on 9/11. That's not to say that he has any preconceived notion, but I think he does recognize that there's a number of unanswered questions, including a fuller explanation of the Saudis' role and why the Bushes tried so hard to cover up what their role was. Why are members of the bin Laden family flown out of the country when all commercial and military aircraft is grounded? The government still denies that happened. It happened. It's covered in my book, Jeb and the Bush Crime Family, which you can get on Amazon or by going to rogerstone.com or stonecoldtruth.com, which will be republished next year in paperback with a new chapter on George P. Bush, the land commissioner in Texas, the next Bush criminal who would like to be president.
I think it was Marvin Bush. Wasn't Marvin Bush in charge of security detail of the World Trade Center complex on 9/11?
Marvin had an interest in the company that provided security for the building. Now, that company had since the time they had the contract, had used bomb-sniffing dogs in their security detail. But they stopped using them roughly 2 weeks before the attack on America.
Okay. Now, we've got a couple of minutes left before we reach the top of the hour, and you definitely still have to go at 5 o'clock, correct?
I'm afraid that I do. I've got some campaign work to do. I'm an independent operator.
Yes.
I have no formal or informal role in the Trump campaign. I most certainly am not the person who prepared Mr. Trump for the debate. I would have favored a harder-edged assault. On the other hand, he did score on the issue of trade and jobs and the economy. I did think Hillary gave him a few softballs he didn't hit, but it's only the first debate.
Oh, sure. In every trilogy, everybody knows the second movie's the best one.
Well, in fact, this is even the story of the Nixon-Kennedy debates. You see, the lore is that Kennedy wiped up the floor with Nixon in debate 1, which he essentially did. Nixon was ill. He was running a fever. He was on antibiotics. He'd just gotten out of the hospital with a serious staph infection. Nixon hit 5 speeches and rallies on his way to Chicago. Jack Kennedy got to Chicago early and spent the whole day sunning himself on the hotel roof with 2 hookers. He was deeply tanned when he went to the debate. He moved to Nixon's right on Cuba, on defense, on the so-called missile gap, which kind of flummoxed Nixon. Nixon melted down on national television. Now, the history books will tell you that's it. That's not the truth. In second debate, Nixon bounced back sharply. In the third debate, he was stronger. And in the fourth debate, and here's the key, where the television audience was only 10,000 people less than the first debate, he wiped the floor with Kennedy. It was his best debate of the 3. That's why he really won the 1960 election. And it was stolen from him in Chicago and Texas. Now the liberals say, oh, well, flipping Chicago wouldn't have given him the election. They're right, it wouldn't. But Lyndon Johnson stole hundreds of thousands of ballots in Texas. In fact, 95,000 people voted for the Nixon Lodge ticket in Dallas alone. and their ballots were thrown out and burned before they could have a recount.
Oh
In
yeah,
fact,
I got so many questions about the Kennedy assassination. And I'll get to that.
well, Steve, here's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
We have the 55th anniversary coming up in just a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be debating Gerald Posner on the actual 22nd. The proposition is who killed John Kennedy. He's going to argue Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay.
I'm going to make a different argument. But I'd be happy to come back at that time, and we can do 2 hours on the entire question of who killed John Kennedy.
Okay. Yeah. I think that would be good. I would still want to also talk a little bit about ways that's before the campaign. You said it's the 22nd.
No, it'd be after the election.
Oh, after the election.
22nd.
Okay. After the
This
election.
November will be the 55th anniversary of John Kennedy's murder.
That's right.
It would be a perfect time to do the show. Now, in 2 hours, I'll take a question about anything: Watergate, Trump's upcoming inauguration, whatever you want to talk about at that time.
I got one more big question from somebody that I thought had just like one of the best questions. This is regarding the FBI.
Yes.
I have somebody who asked, what leverage may have been used against Comey by the administration or the Department of Justice, if any? What would motivate someone with a long history of doing what's right to not recommend charges?
I would argue with the premise of the question. He doesn't have such a long record. He investigated the Sandy Berger affair. That's where a Clinton aide slipped into the National Archives, stole documents that showed that Bill Clinton could have killed bin Laden, but didn't, shoved them down his pants and slipped out, spent not a day in jail. Who ran the investigation? James Comey. Then there was the Mark Rich pardons. That's where Bill Clinton traded multi-million-dollar contributions from Denise Rich and in return pardoned her fugitive on the lam financier husband, Mark Rich. Who ran the investigations? James Comey.
So we've run out of the hour. I got a couple seconds just to put your link up there.
Sure. You can go to stonecoldtruth.com. You can go to stonezone.com. And you can go to rogerstone.com, and you can see my writings and my books in all those places.
Excellent. Roger Stone, thank you so much. I think this interview was a tremendous success. I'm so glad you were here. Please tell Mr. Trump I said hi, and he can do an interview on my show anytime.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.